I am Alex Melendrez, Organizing Manager for YIMBY Action, covering the Peninsula and the South Bay region, and your moderator for today. We are hosting this debate to not just give candidates an opportunity to express their vision and opinions, but to highlight our ongoing and systemic housing crisis that impacts us all. The state legislature plays one of the most important roles, especially in recent years, to help address our housing crisis. There are stories, families, individuals, real people impacted daily. That's why it matters, and that's why we at YIMBY Action do the work. If you wish to have a say in the endorsement process, or you support our mission for a better future, I highly encourage all of you to become involved and sign up to become a member of YIMBY Action. I'm going to drop the link real quick. We are joined by South San Francisco City Council member James Coleman, San Mateo Deputy Mayor Diane Papan, Redwood City Mayor Giselle Hale, and San Mateo County Community College District Trustee Maurice Goodman. The candidates before you have had an opportunity to see the questions ahead of time. Here's the schedule for today. We're going to start off with opening statements, followed by a general question for all the candidates. Our order for the first half of the day will be James Coleman, Diane Papan, Giselle, and Maurice Goodman. Once the candidates have gone, each candidate will have one opportunity to rebut another candidate. The receiving candidate has 1 minute to respond back. We will then move on to candidate-specific questions. Same rebuttal rules apply. One rebuttal for one candidate and one reply at the end of the questions. We will then move on to 12 rapid-fire questions where the order will be reversed. Maurice Goodman, Giselle Hale, Diane Papan, and James Coleman, with 1 to 2 sentence answers. At max, they should be 30 seconds. We will then conclude with closing remarks in the same order. So without further ado, let's go on to opening statements. Candidates, you just may pick up right after the last candidate has finished, but do give our timekeeper a second to reset the clock. Without further ado, take it away, Councilmember Coleman.
Yeah, hey everyone, it's definitely great to be here. I just finished walking and knocking around 100 houses today for Universal Preschool in South San Francisco. And thank you so much, Peninsula For Everyone, for hosting this wonderful debate. For those of you who don't know me, I'm James Coleman. I currently serve on the City Council of South San Francisco. I was born and raised in a working class family here in South City. My father was a FedEx worker, and my mother's a lab assistant who works at Kaiser. She's also a Taiwanese immigrant. When I was 5 years old, my father suffered a traumatic injury that left him paralyzed from the waist down, and my mother had to work 2 jobs in order to make ends meet. Growing up, working class profoundly shaped my values. At a young age, I experienced what it was like to fall through the cracks, and growing up, I wanted to make sure that our government and our medical system worked for all of us and not just the wealthy few. In 2020, we saw how COVID disproportionately wreaked havoc and continues to wreak havoc on our working families. In housing, healthcare, childcare, and your education system, we saw how the public health crisis of police brutality was not just a distant injustice, but a real and present issue here in our own community. And we successfully ran for city council, defeating an 18-year incumbent to bring about that change and the justice that we wanted to see. So I'm the only candidate running a corporate-free campaign for state assembly, and we have a very clear purpose. That is that Sacramento can't just work for the wealthy and well-connected, it has to work for all of us. That means a wealth tax on the biggest billionaires and corporations, universal preschool and childcare, which I am already championing here in South City. It means aggressive action on climate change and holding PG accountable, universal single-payer healthcare, and most exciting of all, building mixed-income social housing to address our housing crisis. And I'm sure, as you'll find out, voters in San Mateo County have a real choice to make this election. And I look forward to talking to you about these issues today and how we can build a California for everyone. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Diane Papan here. I'm honored to be here today, and I want to begin by thanking you for conducting this forum. I'm running for office because I know I can make a difference. I'm a homegrown daughter of this district. Its residents are my family, friends, and neighbors, and I know the struggles and the inequalities that exist here. And I have demonstrated a track record of successfully working to improve our community. I've led with compassion because of where I come from. I am the granddaughter of Greek immigrants and the daughter of a man who was sent to school not knowing any English. They worked hard to survive. And growing up, we had challenges that inspired my family to work in public service. It was a way to address systemic challenges so other families might not have to go through everything our family went through. My brother suffered from a rare illness for most of his life, and I saw my parents had to fight the health insurance company who was trying to cancel our health insurance when the big bills started racking up. And my mother suffered from lupus and then cancer. With so much sickness in my family, I definitely have a deep understanding that life is fragile. You get one shot at it, and you can use it to make a difference. My history of service, which includes 20 years of running a nonprofit, doing boots on the ground work with helping families, my community work in our schools and our neighborhoods, my law practice representing mom and pop businesses, and my elected work on the city council and on several county boards. I've been dedicated to bridging economic divides in our community. I've been driven by compassion, and I'm going to take that compassion to Sacramento. I'm running as a leader who will invest in game-changing strategies to address our most pressing needs: affordable housing, better wages, quality healthcare services, including mental health care, greater percentages of paid sick leave, especially for low wage earners, climate change, including drought resiliency and wildfire prevention, early learning for all kids, fighting against the abuses of the gig economy. And as a mother of a teenage daughter, I'm going to fight for mental health services for our kids who are being crippled by social media. We've got to work together against its harmful effects. So I'm honored to be with you here today, and I thank you for your engagement.
Hi everyone, I'm Giselle Hale. I'm a mom, a businesswoman, and the mayor of Redwood City. I was raised in the Midwest by a single mom, and we struggled with food and housing security. Meanwhile, my husband was a foster child who was taken from his parents at age 6, passed around the system, and later his extended family. Without a safety net to catch us, we would have been left behind. As newlyweds in the Bay Area, between the high cost of housing and my student loans, we couldn't afford rent. So we spent the first 5 years of our marriage sharing a rental with roommates so that we could save to buy our first home together. So it should come as no surprise that with this kind of lived experience, housing is what motivated me to start serving. I began as a planning commissioner in 2014, where I worked on the revitalization of Redwood City's downtown, and later as a council member in 2018. In my 8 years of service, I voted to approve more housing than everyone on this panel combined. I've passed some of the most progressive local policies, like our city's ADU ordinance, and I've worked to make Redwood City an up-and-coming regional transportation hub. And I challenged my city to be one of the first to sign the Seamless Transportation Petition. On homelessness, I spearheaded the largest safe parking program in the district, negotiated a land swap with the county to make way for a navigation center, 240 rooms, and I publicly supported the purchase of 3 hotels in my city under Project Home Key. And finally, I'm the only candidate here who supported SB 9, 10, 35, and 50. Our campaign has the sole endorsement of both housing chairs, Senator Scott Wiener and Assemblywoman Buffy Wicks. They know I will be an ally in urgently addressing our housing needs. We have the resources to win and an army of volunteers ready to work. All that our campaign is missing is you. I'd be honored to have your support, and I look forward to your questions.
Good afternoon. My name is Maurice Goodman. I'm the San Mateo County Community College trustee. I've been an elected official here in San Mateo County representing voters just like you since 2008. I have a proven track record of standing up, advocating for housing, transportation, and other issues that affect communities of color and are most vulnerable. I'm a youth developer and educator. I'm the product of housing projects. I'm product of Section 8 housing, rent control, and I have also experienced more than my share of racism and discrimination in the housing market. To remove these barriers and many more that exist today in housing, we must understand that representation matters in policymaking, in boardrooms, and yes, even on debate committees. Along with representation, there must also be courage, political courage, courage to call people out, but also the courage to call people in and hold them accountable, to act and to be better versions of themselves and to serve those that are not in the room. I look forward to answering your questions, and I'm glad to be here today. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, candidates. We are now going to move on to the general question for everybody. Just to reiterate, for the rebuttal portion, it's going to take place once each of the 4 candidates have had an opportunity to answer the question. So our question for all the candidates today is, Much discussion in housing over the last few years has revolved around local control. As you all know, for many decades in California, cities have essentially absolute control over their land use and zoning. And in that time, the state's housing shortage has become worse in the nation. Given that history, do you believe that in California we currently have too much local control, not enough local control, or just the right amount? Take it away, Councilmember Coleman.
Yeah, really, I feel like the term local control has really been abused, right? Ideally, our cities would have that local control to shape the housing that's getting built, assuming genuine intentions to build the housing necessary to serve our growing population. But when cities fail to meet that responsibility to build housing, which they absolutely historically have, then we need to make sure that those cities are held accountable and that our state comes in and ensures that the housing that's much needed to get built is actually built. But if we really genuinely care about local control, then let me tell you, social housing is how we get that. If we want truly local control and not at the whims of private developers, we need to make sure that our cities have the ability to dictate the terms of the housing that's being built. That means the level of affordability, that means maximizing the deeper levels of affordability, and also the labor standards and the environmental standards of that housing that is getting built.
Thank you. So local control is and has been evolving. Control was taken, but so were some really meaningful tools. For example, cities used to have redevelopment agencies, but that tool was removed. Recently, the state legislature has enacted a range of laws to enable more ministerial approvals for ADUs, lot splits, and SB 35 projects for cities that haven't met their housing requirements. Local control is about tools, and it's my preference that cities be given more tools to incentivize housing that meets local needs rather than only have local control being removed. And also, not every city has contributed to the housing deficit in the same way. Like in my city, it's about a 2-to-1 jobs housing ratio. And I remember asking a legislator from a nearby county, have you ever seen Bay Meadows, which added like some 3,000 homes? They hadn't even ever heard of it. So a broad-based approach may fail to take into account what a specific person has done or a city has done and what that data is. But that said, we've got a lot of new laws in place, and let's see where they go and let's see how they play out. Let's see what we can do with them.
I really think this notion is almost a false choice, state control versus local control. What and honestly, I think most people care about is an effective government that actually solves problems. So instead of fixating over who has control, we should be asking, what is the most effective level of government to solve a particular problem? And if cities aren't building to meet people's needs, then we need state support. And if they are building, then where and how and other details should be up to them. You know, what I find remarkable is that we're even having this discussion in a housing crisis. In any other crisis situation, a fire, a flood, a war, you ask for support. I want to see not only the state supporting cities in achieving their housing goals, I want to see the federal government doing more. I think a great recent example of that is the state's ADU laws. And some of our best laws have come from state leaders who work to collaborate with local governments that they serve. So that's the approach that I will take in Sacramento.
Well, to me, local control means something totally different as an African-American. With roots to the South, we all know all too well how local control was used to further the argument of segregation. I believe while there's not too much, with the evolution of local control and the response by our state legislators, there is a lot of work to continue. Our responsibility to people of color, we must do all we can to deconstruct systems of oppression and racism, to create and promote ladders of economic opportunity and access to housing for all, and all the community that our people work and live and want to live. Where one lives is directly tied to one's projected life trajectory. It impacts their health, their schooling, and overall outlook. We must do better.
Excellent. Thank you so much again, candidates. It is now time for rebuttals. We'll do first come, first serve. If you would like to raise your hand to rebut one of the existing candidates, you may. Anyone? I don't see any hands, which I thought might actually happen, at least for the first question. Wow, such a polite group of candidates. I like this. Well, in that case, we're going to move on ahead of schedule to the candidate-specific questions. Again, same rebuttal rules apply. They will go at the end if you so choose to rebut your candidates, fellow candidates, as we've just seen. Nobody had decided to raise their hand. So we will go first to Councilmember Coleman. Councilmember Coleman, you were recently the sole vote against a 480 unit housing proposal in South San Francisco. Why did you cast that vote?
Yeah, so I cast that vote because the developers over the 3 years of planning that development had refused to engage with our local unions. And what were the unions asking for? They were asking for a living wage, healthcare, and local hiring. And by the way, through my negotiations, I got those developers to commit to building all electric and increase the proportion of affordable homes from 10 to 15%. But if we want to build a truly inclusive movement, which I know we all do, then we cannot leave our working families behind. The workers who build our housing need to be on board too. And in the process of increasing the supply of affordable housing, we cannot be increasing demand. And that's why I am working on engaging our building trades with private developers early in the process to avoid these controversial meetings. It's why I've been working on a pre-qualification draft to expedite housing permits if they abide by certain labor standards. And lastly, pursuing mixed income social housing in South City so that we as a city can dictate the terms of the labor that is being used to build our housing and guarantee a living wage, local hiring, and healthcare for all of our workers.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Coleman. We are now going to go on to Deputy Mayor Diane Papan. As council member of San Mateo, your city was once sued for the denial of a 10-unit proposal on El Camino under the Housing Accountability Act. You voted to deny the proposal and the appeal, yet San Mateo ultimately lost the case. Why did you oppose this new housing?
Thank you, Alex. Well, the short answer is we didn't. I say we because the council voted 4-1 against this proposal, and the decision had absolutely nothing to do with the density of the project. The council asked for 2 minor changes of the developer. One was to make the parking spaces just slightly bigger, and the other one was a setback at the 3rd story, increasing the setback at the 3rd story as a means of sort of modestly enhancing the privacy for the surrounding residences. These changes didn't require a change in the density of the project. The council in no way rejected the amount of the housing. The developer wasn't agreeable to these minor changes and instead spent 4 years litigating the matter. And they did win. And if you read the appellate decision, it actually states that our decision was extremely close. Again, there was never opposition to this 10-unit project on the part of the council, minor requests for some changes, and we improved it the other night, and it's still 10 units.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Mayor Hale, you have previously called for cleanups of encampment sites in Redwood City around Caltrans, CHP lands, which is the California Highway Patrol, and rail sites. Do you think this is one of the solutions to homelessness?
Thank you, Alex. Well, first and foremost, homelessness is not a crime, and treating it as one is cruel. My city has made no arrests related to homelessness since 2018. You know, when I meet with our unhoused residents, I tell them always that I am their mayor too, and I serve to protect their safety too. You know, long-term, we prevent homelessness by building housing and strengthening our safety nets. And short-term, we need supportive housing and services. My city has done more than any city in this district to produce housing and to address homelessness. I spearheaded the largest safe parking program in the district, negotiated a land swap with the county to make way for a navigation center and 240 rooms of housing, and publicly supported the purchase of 3 hotels in my city under Project Homekey. I also created a countywide mayor's mental health initiative and will be a strong leader on rebuilding the mental health care system that Reagan dismantled. So my strong record will be valuable in Sacramento as we work towards solutions.
Thank you, Mayor. We are now going to go to Trustee Goodman. Trustee, AB 302 was a safe parking bill by Assemblymember Berman, introduced for students experiencing homelessness in community colleges. You and the board were noted for having significant reservations. What have you done to move forward with this issue?
Immediately, I reached out to Assemblymember Berman's office and I spoke with him about changes that needed to be made. Those changes were made. However, it was an unfunded measure, and at the state level, it died. And so specifically what I've done though since that bill, we reached out directly to San Francisco State and other universities to make sure housing was available to our students as well, creating opportunities. We've also introduced policy and created emergency funding for homeless students to receive funding and support in emergency situations. I've supported and advocated for addressing food insecurity, including a $1 million annual investment by our board. I advocated for student housing and taken advantage of nearly $90 million this year to build up to 500 beds at the College of San Mateo to address housing for foster youth, vets, as well as families. I, along with a board colleague, and worked with Senator Becker's office to introduce Senate Bill 893 that I hope you all can support, and co-authors Assemblymember Berman and Mullen, to give our districts greater flexibility to address barriers such as housing.
Thank you, trustee. Thank you, everyone. Now I would like to ask again if anybody would like to rebut one of the other candidates. I'm going to wait a few seconds to see if anybody raises their hand. I'm assuming everybody can raise their hand in Zoom, or if you can't, you could just physically raise your hand. I see a raised hand by Councilmember Coleman. Councilmember Coleman, you have 1 minute, excuse me, to rebut another candidate. You're muted.
There you go. Yeah, so Mayor Hale, I was very glad to hear that because I was really concerned at the language that you used. Our unhoused neighbors face a lot of stigma already about being quote unquote dangerous, but they're people. Some of them are down on their luck and experiencing mental illness, substance abuse, or their healthcare and housing needs are being left unmet. So, we shouldn't be further criminalizing poverty or mental illness or substance abuse. We should be providing people with the resources and the case management to get them back on their feet. But if we really want to reduce homelessness, we need to alleviate the forces that lead to homelessness in the first place. Renters' rights are critical, especially when we have such out of control housing costs. We need to repeal state loopholes like the Ellis Act and Costa-Hawkins, and corporate landlords need to understand that San Mateo County renters are not your ATM. I'm a vehement supporter of the expansion of tenants' rights and think it's the absolute most important thing to pair with more housing. And I think I'm the only candidate here who is not a homeowner. I'm not a wealthy homeowner, but I am the strongest opponent for all renter protections. And we have been leading in South City with creating a rental database and providing mediation services for all our renters.
Mayor Hale, you have 1 minute to respond.
Well, I didn't hear a question in there, but my statement on this issue.
I believe your audio is also cut out.
I'm not on mute. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, okay, good. Great. Well, a woman died in an encampment in a fire very similar to the one we experienced in Redwood City 2 weeks ago, in San Francisco just this Wednesday. I serve to protect the health and safety needs of all residents, and my city's call to action was to address those needs. What I've learned in 3 years of working to address homelessness is that effective solutions require collaboration across all levels of government. When we spearheaded the largest safe parking RV program in the district, we realized the status quo solution of allowing overnight parking, it didn't solve anyone's problems, especially not the individuals experiencing homelessness. So the solution was a state law, and we got there with Assemblymember Ting on AB 2553, which now allows these programs to be 24/7 and has greatly assisted us in helping these residents find permanent housing.
Thank you, Mayor Hale. We still have 3 other candidates if they wish to rebut another candidate. Would anybody like to raise their hand? I see Trustee Goodman. Trustee Goodman, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, I just want to fact check my brother James and let him know I am not a homeowner. I'm a renter as well.
Thank you.
What a quick response. Would anybody else like to rebut one of the other candidates? So far, we still have Deputy Mayor Papan and Mayor Hale, if you wish to use it. Again, you don't have to, but the opportunity is before you. Okay, moving on. We are very ahead of schedule. We are now going to go on to the rapid fire section. We are now going to, there are going to be 10 rapid fire questions for each of the candidates who will answer under 30 seconds. There will be no rebuttals, and the order of the candidates will now switch, and I'll repeat it so that we memorize it. It's going to be Maurice Goodman, Giselle Hale, Diane Papan, and James Coleman. Again, the new order is Maurice Goodman, Giselle Hale, Diane Papan, and James Coleman. And similar to what we've done before, especially since this is a rapid fire section, we are going to have the candidates pick up immediately after the other candidate. And before we move on, I would like everybody to thank our timekeeper for having to go through the rapid fire section. So we will start with the first question. Does building market rate housing reduce or increase the cost of housing in a city? Trustee?
Yes, while I'm an advocate for affordable housing, I do understand that the only way to get out of the housing shortage dilemma that we're in is to build more housing, including market rate housing, as a means to address the supply and ultimately bringing down the cost overall.
All right. Well, so building market rate housing, it reduces the cost of housing because it satisfies the need of consumers who might have otherwise purchased naturally affordable housing, remodeled it, torn it down, whatever. I have consistently stood on the side of all housing is good housing, and that's the kind of strong leadership that we're going to need in the Assembly to move forward on this issue.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Adding more inventory generally leads to a reduction in housing prices.
Studies have shown that building more market rate housing does reduce the pressure of gentrification and reduces rising housing costs in the surrounding community. That is clear, but that does not mean that we have to settle for building tons of market rate housing. We should work to truly maximize the number of affordable units for the housing that's built, and we can do so through social housing. And we must also protect for the displacement of families if we are replacing affordable units or rent-controlled units with market rate. That is important too.
Excellent. Okay. Question number 2. How will you continue the effort to make our Assembly District safer for pedestrians and cyclists?
I will support and advocate progressive development policies that promote transit-based housing, making sure bike lanes are a part of transit corridor plans, as well as supporting laws and the laws that are in place that keep our pedestrians safe already locally.
So I've worked on this issue from a number of angles: safe routes to school, slow streets, Vision Zero strategy, micromobility for last mile transportation, and e-bikes for essential workers. At the end of the day, we need better bike and pedestrian infrastructure. And I think we have a huge opportunity when coupled with this housing element to really start thinking about the El Camino Real as a corridor and an artery for what could be much better access for bikes and pedestrians to transit options.
So as a legislator, there are several tools that are available for bike and pedestrian infrastructure. These include the State Active Transportation Program, and that provides for competitive grant funding. In this case, that funding comes through MTC. I'd also ensure that local congestion management agencies like CCAG have the tools and the resources to plan for and directly invest in active transportation improvements. It's going to be a big part of how we move forward, and I look forward to providing more resources to make it happen.
Yeah, it's easy to paint some green on the street, but we really need truly protected bike lanes and traffic calming initiatives. And we need real collaboration between our cities, our county, and Caltrans to build this infrastructure in a way that's seamless. If we can make it safer for our bikers and walkers and pair that with reliable, frequent, and seamless public transit, then more people will choose to use sustainable modes of transit. And it'd also be great for the environment. Cars are one of the top sources of carbon emissions. And that's why we've been endorsed by Sally Lieber, Alfred Tu, and 350.org co-founder Bill McKibben because of my dedication to environmental issues.
All right, we're getting going. I like this. What advice do you have for us to talk to our friends and neighbors about not being afraid of denser housing?
First, I'd say meet them where they are. There are true NIMBYs, we all know, but there are also NIMBYs that I believe are YIMBYs in waiting. There must definitely be a sense of compassionate urgency. I believe there's a way that we can be more inclusive in inviting others to the table and making sure that they're a part of the process and understanding their responsibility to our community.
Yeah, I always talk about values. You know, our district is diverse, it's multi-generational, it's inclusive. These are values worth protecting. Quality of life is much more about the services you have access to, good teachers, therapists, service workers, coaches, than it is about building heights and setbacks. So if you run down the list of things that make a community great, it takes housing to make those things possible. I love actually having this exact conversation when I knock on the doors of longtime residents whose children may have been forced out, but who might oppose some of the downtown infill. This is a conversation that we need to have. We need to be bold enough to keep having with all residents.
So I say seeing is believing. And I really think you got to take friends and neighbors to actual examples of such developments, and being able to engage directly with residents and see how these communities function really is the best tool for all of us. It's sort of like the fear of the unknown is a significant barrier. And I often take visiting friends through Bay Meadows, that development, to showcase, you know, what a wonderful walkable and transit-oriented development looks like. And I agree with some of the comments that have already occurred. We've got to focus on where there's common ground, and there's a lot of common ground in this district. And I think we're more than capable of bringing people together.
Yeah, so I ran for city council in a district where there are a lot of residents who are very concerned about denser housing. For those of you who aren't familiar with the district I represent in South San Francisco, it's 80% single family homes. But I won because I went door to door, made tens of thousands of phone calls, and had those great conversations about the benefits of denser housing, about what we need to do to create affordable, sustainable, vibrant, safe, and walkable neighborhoods. It's not a radical ideal already. Many of our homes are multi-generational and they have multiple families living in them. It's just a matter of making sure it's legalized.
Excellent. Moving on to the next question, question number 4. This might be my favorite question. As you know, there is far more demand for affordable housing than there is money to fund it. How would you propose to raise more revenue for affordable housing?
Among those that we all know, I'm one to think outside of the box. And so I would suggest creating a local opportunity for crowdfunding for community members for their, with that, there's a twofold benefit of buy-in and addressing the NIMBYism, but also economic opportunity for families and community members to reinvest in the community that they live in.
We really need an all of the above strategy on funding affordable housing. This means more dollars from the general fund, from running regional and state housing bonds. And yeah, let's bring back redevelopment, absolutely. I would also like to see split roll enacted to provide more money for affordable housing locally. This needs to be our top spending priority as a state, in my opinion.
I like the question too. So I'd use some of our surplus for affordable housing. It's one-time funding that's perfect for construction. Again, I'd advocate for at least a limited return of the local redevelopment agencies, so local revenues could be returned to invest in affordable housing. I think the loss of this tool was a profound setback. There's also some potential options like Assemblymember Lee's bill that will enable social housing to serve a mix of incomes and pay for itself. With a little seed money for a revolving loan fund or a housing bond, local housing authorities could build or purchase housing facilities and better maintain them in perpetuity.
We need a wealth tax, and more broadly, we need progressive taxation because billionaires and corporations need to pay their fair share. But a problem we have right now is that the affordable housing we're building requires additional public funds after 30 to 55 years, or else it becomes in danger of converting back into market rate. And so what we need to do is build mixed income social housing in a cost-neutral fashion, where the higher income homes subsidize affordable homes, so that we are building affordable housing that is permanently affordable and does not have the danger of converting into market rate in the future.
Okay, moving on to question 5. This is a bit more legislative kind of questions, and some of you have actually gotten a little bit ahead of me, which is kind of fun. So, question number 5. Outgoing Assembly Member Kevin Mullen voted yes on SB 9 to end exclusionary zoning in California. If you were in Assembly Member Mullen's seat at the time, how would you have voted on SB 9?
I would have voted yes, point simple.
I agree, and I'll expand a little bit. So I would have voted yes. I'm a big fan of housing policies that create multi-generational housing opportunities and first-time home ownership opportunities, that generational wealth building. Exclusionary zoning is a part of what got us into this current housing crisis, and it has driven Black and Brown residents from our communities. Every neighborhood in the Midwest where I'm from has duplexes. They do just fine. I've lived in them. They're wonderful solutions for neighborhoods. And I'll say, as the city electeds here, I'm the only one who didn't sign an opposed letter for SB 9.
Just by correction, I didn't sign a letter opposing SB 9. I think a lot went into this bill, and I was grateful for amendments that included Marin County was going to be a part of it, and it required owner occupancy to prevent speculation that would have only driven up prices. We need housing yesterday, and we're going to implement SB 9. It's the law of the land. I'm not as concerned about it as others are. I think we'll come together and we'll make it work. Just the other night, I advocated that we should allow more than 25% demolition of existing walls. Instead, we should allow 50% of the walls to be the external walls to be demolished without review, because it allows for more flexibility in building on R1 lots. So these are just some of the ways we're going to implement it.
We absolutely need to get rid of exclusionary zoning and build more, but we also need to figure out creative ways that we can add more affordability components while still allowing that housing to get built. And something that we should seriously look into is the legalization of 5 homes, because that is when our state density bonus would kick in, and as well as many local inclusionary ordinances that can start to require that one of those homes can be affordable.
Excellent. Okay, moving on to question number 6. Sorry, a little bit of a technical issue there. AB 1482 in 2019 limited the ability of landlords to drastically raise rents on tenants, as well as provide just cause eviction protections. How would you have voted on this bill if you were in the assembly at that time?
I would have voted to limit the ability to drastically raise such rents. As we know too well, that many families that we represent in our county are often living paycheck to paycheck, and they're often either a paycheck or a flat tire away from being homeless themselves. And I believe every little helps, and I would definitely support this.
Yeah, I agree, and I'll build from there and say that my city was actually one of the few to pass an urgency ordinance to make 1482 effective in October of 2019 instead of January, when it actually went into effect. We were very concerned about the gap, that little time gap, just creating a window of vulnerability for many residents, and especially heading into the holidays. And so I voted for that as well.
I once had my rent raised 30%. Needless to say, it was a constructive eviction and we moved. So I've been on the receiving end of an exorbitant rent increase. However, I haven't been a big fan of rent control either, because it ultimately doesn't keep rents down. Look at San Francisco, and it can hurt small mom and pops. That said, this was a consensus piece of legislation with a significant cap for a set period of time, and it appears to be working.
Yeah, I am a renters' rights advocate. We need to address the root causes of housing insecurity and go farther to protect our tenants from unjust evictions and outrageous rent hikes. Let's reel in our corporate landlords. We need tenants' right to counsel. In South San Francisco, I've been leading and establishing a rental database and increasing access to mediation services. I support the repeal of Costa-Hawkins, and I will fight to get rid of loopholes like the Ellis Act. I was proud to support Alex Lee's AB 854, and it was a massive shame that I wasn't able to come down to a floor vote. And that's also why I am endorsed solely by Assemblymember Alex Lee.
Okay, moving on. Question number 7. Speaking of Assemblymember Alex Lee, actually, Assemblymember Alex Lee recently introduced AB 2053, the Social Housing Act, which you might have heard earlier, which would create the California Housing Authority, and it would authorize it to build publicly owned, union-built, financially sustainable, affordable housing. Do you support the concept of California building social housing?
Yes, not only do I support it, but if given the opportunity, I would have done all I could to co-author it. I believe not only is this a great thing, but what it does, it addresses the issue of housing with a sense of urgency that we cannot wait for local municipalities to do their part. We have to step in as a state and make sure that we're doing our part to address families and home housing insecurities during these times.
I'm excited this conversation is happening. You know, our council is taking up this issue actually at our next meeting. So I can't say how I'll vote because I'd have to recuse myself, but I can say I love the idea of social housing. I have experienced it in other countries firsthand. I think what we're doing in Redwood City with the Project Home Key conversion to its affordable housing for seniors is actually a very similar step in this direction. So again, I'm a proponent of all of the above strategies. We need all of the tools to get us there on affordable housing.
I'll be brief. Yes, and where do I sign on?
Yes, and it is the main fight and a core tenet of our campaign. I don't just talk about social housing, I am actively leading the charge to build social housing here in South San Francisco and San Mateo County. Recently, our council gave unanimous direction under my leadership to place an Article 34 ballot measure on the ballot for November of this year to allow us to build that social housing. And I'm looking forward to working with Alex Lee and building mixed income social housing throughout all of California. This is also why our campaign has been solely endorsed by Alex Lee.
Okay, question number 8. As it stands right now, people who have bought their houses recently pay far more in taxes than people who have bought their homes before 1978, thanks to Proposition 13. Do you think Prop 13 needs to be reformed? And did you support Prop 15, an attempt to partially reform Prop 13 back in 2020?
Okay, let me answer this correctly. So yes, I believe Prop 13 needs to be reformed. Additionally, Prop 15, yes, I did support it. I believe it's high time for big corporations and the likes of South San Francisco, Redwood City, and throughout our county to focus more on being good community stewards and less on greed and profits.
Yeah, I agree. I'm very much in favor of split roll reform of Prop 13 to close the exact loopholes that Maurice was describing. That really just, we're subsidizing these companies to avoid paying their fair share of taxes, and it's hurting our schools, it's hurting our cities. Obviously, it's a housing issue. I was a very early endorser of Yes on 15 and a very active volunteer. And I think there's lessons we learned from that campaign, and we should be taking another stab at this reform. It is really one of the best opportunities we have to unlock more funding for cities and schools, and I will definitely be an advocate for this in the legislature.
So I believe Prop 15 wasn't optimal because it came during a pandemic with parameters that would have hurt mom and pop commercial property owners who were under tremendous strain. Not all businesses are wealthy high-tech companies that support well-paid executives. They're small businesses that support families. I think we've got to have a change to Prop 13, and that will come. And I'd like to start with big commercial buildings like the B of A building in San Francisco. I think it's going to have the biggest impact, and it's going to come from those who can most afford to pay it and should pay their fair share.
I absolutely supported Prop 15 in 2020. And yes, Prop 13 absolutely needs to be reformed. Let's call it what it is. Prop 13 was a massive tax cut for large corporations that drastically cut our public school funding. We need to make sure that the richest among us are paying their fair share and fully funding the programs and resources that all our working families depend on. That's why in South San Francisco, I built a coalition to tax the biggest corporations in our city, provide universal childcare and preschool for every family, and also raise the wages of teacher wages to a living wage.
Okay, we've got 2 questions left. Let's move back to some current legislation. Recently, Representative, or I should say Assembly Member Laura Friedman of Glendale, introduced the bill AB 2097 to eliminate local parking mandates in areas well served by transit. Do you support ending parking requirements that increase the cost of housing and encourage driving?
First of all, we're in an existential crisis, climate crisis here in our world, and we have to do all we can to address that, to committing to decarbonization. We need to support walkable cities. We need to support transit-based housing, as well as opportunities to create safer opportunities for our pedestrians, as well as those that bike and ride to work.
So one of the lessons our city learned from the downtown precise plan implementation, which is how we got the beautiful downtown we have now, was that we actually overparked these transit-oriented developments. And so that opportunity to turn that into housing is now gone for decades, right? I advocated for and supported AB 1401 as an ABAG director. We ultimately voted to support the bill. And I'm also endorsed by the bill's author, Assemblywoman Friedman, who knows that I will advocate for smart transit solutions in the assembly.
I'll be brief. Totally in favor of it, particularly near transit hubs. We got to get off our cars and our addiction to cars.
Right. When we're building housing, we need to make sure that we are housing people and not cars. But we need to go farther and make sure that our public transit systems are frequent and reliable. We have to fight for seamless transit, especially here in the Bay Area, where we have so many competing transit agencies.
Okay, we are now on to the last question, probably my second favorite question of the rapid fire section. So, question number 10. We support everyone who gets more housing built, but feel free to pander to our audience. Are you a YIMBY?
Yes, indeed, I'm a YIMBY, but I also am someone, again, that has compassionate urgency and a sense of growing the inclusion and making sure that those that are not YIMBYs understand the urgency to become YIMBYs and understand their commitment to their fellow neighbors and to those that are not yet in their communities.
Well, I am a card-carrying member. I am because I believe we can reverse this situation. You know, quick story, my husband lived for a time in Victoria, British Columbia. They had a housing crisis. They built a lot of housing. Guess what happened? Prices came down. This stuff works. We just need to have the courage to do hard things. And I want to thank you for the work that you've done to help local leaders trying to fight this good fight, and state leaders as well. So very much appreciate it, and would be honored to have your support as we go to Sacramento.
I think the best way to answer that question is to look at my record of helping to create housing, including affordable housing. We have 3 all affordable housing projects in different phases going on now that are going to result in excess of 500 affordable housing units. And during my time on the council, some 2,800 housing units have been approved and or built. San Mateo has added so many housing units that it's now the most populous city in the county. Is it enough? Absolutely not. And we can do more. And I believe the fastest way we can do it is by converting largely underutilized properties. I'll continue to make it happen. And I'll let you decide if that makes me a YIMBY or not.
We definitely need more housing, more affordable housing, and stronger tenant protection. And I hope you all share the same excitement that I do, because I believe that we can go farther, build mixed income social housing, guarantee housing as a human right, and create a peninsula that is truly for everyone. Thank you.
Okay, we are actually way ahead of schedule. Thank you, everybody, for going through our rapid fire section. I would, again, like to especially thank our timekeeper, Mike Dunham. Thank you very much. I know the audience can't see him right now, but he is definitely keeping track of the time pretty well. We are going to move on to closing statements. So candidates will have 1 minute to give, 1 to 2 minutes to give closing statements, or I should say 1 minute, excuse me. But seeing that we're a little bit, I should say, early in our presentation, I would say 2 minutes should probably be fine. I do want to give Mike a moment to adjust the clock. Okay, there we go. Closing statements, Trustee Goodman, go right ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for having me here. Initially not being invited, I appreciate the opportunity. As I stated before, representation matters, but absent that, political courage matters. It is not enough to say you are for equity and for people of color, but when given the opportunity to act and call in and not call out, the exclusion of the very voice you seek to stand for, we must do better. Thank you for having me, and I hope to have your support.
Maurice, I'm glad you made it here too. I want to say thank you as well for this very well-run forum, Alex. You are so far ahead of schedule. You know, this race is really about a decision that we need to make. Are we going to go forwards or are we going to go backwards? Kevin Mullen has been a solid vote on housing issues, and I want to do more than that. Together with our housing chairs, I will drive policy forward. In me, you'll have a strong advocate with a solid track record who's already been to battle and knows how to get the job done. And you will join a growing team of over 100 endorsers with a strong fundraising lead. We are building a coalition of voices representing teachers, housers, climate advocates, workers, and families to take to Sacramento. My door, my phone, my DMs, they're always open to you, to ideas I haven't heard and even ones that I may not agree with. Getting to where we need to go is going to take fierce leadership and hard conversations and partnership. And I would be honored to go to battle with you and to have your support. Please message me to get involved in our campaign. Thank you.
I'm here. So I do want to thank you, Alex. I know you put a lot of work into this, and I appreciate the structure of the forum. It really has been an honor to be here today. Look, I'm a daughter of this district. I know what our community is going through, and I know the great wealth disparities that exist here. I'm not seeking this position as a stepping stone. I'm a proven leader who's dedicated herself to serving our community. I produce results, and I'm going to go to Sacramento to continue to produce results. I'm not about platitudes. This is why I have so much grassroots support from so many electeds in this county, from a majority of the county board of supervisors, to a majority of the mayors, to many, many council members and school board members. We've worked together in the trenches and gotten things done. I intend to work with you. I'm here to be educated, and I'll reach out to get that education so that we fight side by side together to accomplish our most important goals of additional housing. And I respectfully ask for your support, and thank you again for your contribution to the process by having this forum today.
All right, thank you so much. Today we all have a real choice to make. What kind of future do we want to build for our renters and working people? What kind of money are we okay with candidates taking? I'm proud to be the only candidate running a clean money, corporate-free campaign because it's way past time we put the interests of working people over that of private profit. I'm beholden to no special interests. Hell, they don't even ask me. I have been leading South San Francisco in building mixed income social housing, in strengthening our tenant protections, and in taxing the rich for universal childcare. There is no reason why California, as the 5th largest economy in the world, cannot lead on the many issues that our community faces today. A wealth tax, Medicare for all, a Green New Deal, building mixed income social housing throughout the entire state. We have a Democratic supermajority. It's time we start acting like it. We need electeds who have the courage to make sure that our boldest ideas are represented in Sacramento for the rest of the state to see, on the issues that matter to us the most, that will bring real material gains to working families all across California. I promise you that I've got the courage to act. And that's why I have the support of dozens of housing leaders and local electeds, people like Assemblymember Alex Lee, Hector Camacho on the Board of Education, Sally Lieber, former pro tem of the State Assembly, and SEIU California, one of the largest unions in the country, and many more. Just 2 days ago, we earned a distinction from AUC's Courage to Change PAC. We were the only ones to earn that. I would be honored if you would join us. Thank you.
Woo, we survived. I did write that in my script. One last time. First off, I want to thank all the candidates for being here and attending this forum. We really appreciate it. One last time, please consider becoming a member of YIMBY Action. We will be endorsing in this race, but outside, we do a lot of work to protect tenants, build homes, and create sustainable communities. I'm going to drop that link real quick one more time. I had a ton of fun and would personally like to show my appreciation for each of the candidates, not just for being here and speaking, but for their public service. Each of them serve their community in elected office, so it is no easy task. I truly mean that. I really do. Before everybody goes, I would like to again quickly thank our two Peninsula For Everyone leads, Brittany Baxter and Mike Dunham, for their volunteer time, Brittany on tech and Mike doing the fabulous work of timekeeping. Thank you, everyone, and we hope you have a fabulous weekend.